Thinking back to that night, and I really wish I didn't have to, I suppose it started with the rain. I'm not exactly sure what time though, as I was really just trying to get all the cleanup done so that I could get back to my apartment. Money had been tight that month, so I had no choice but to pick up extra shifts. What I do really isn't important. I work, or, well, worked, at a small fast food restaurant, just trying my best to get by. It's not necessarily my job of choice, especially with how nosy and obnoxious customers can and will get. Up until then, I had always preferred taking the later shifts, as there were often a lot fewer people than in earlier ones. Although, it wasn't usual that I took the last shift as one of my extras, the one that went to midnight. I usually took the late evening to night shift, 7 to 10 p.m. However, on that particular day, that wasn't really an option, so I had to take the latest shift instead. That was the first and only time I did that. It was nice, I would say, that part of the night at least. Almost no one came in at that time, which meant that I had the place basically to myself, alone with my thoughts and feelings. That's not something I really have much time for in my day-to-day life. However, working that late wasn't all perks. The extra hours, combined with the late time, took a bigger toll on me than my usual extra shifts did. I wasn't used to being up and working so late. Even so, I made a mental note to take more late shifts more often, as the late shift was far easier to manage than all the other ones I took on. Little did I know that I would never have another shift again. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I'm sure you want me to actually start going into what happened, so I will. I remember feeling exhausted by the time the clock on the wall finally struck midnight, signaling the end of my shift. The lack of people was nice, sure, but I was more than ready to flop into my nice, soft bed. So I finished closing up the place, and by the time I was finally ready to leave, the rain was really coming down. Not crazy enough that I'd be knocked off of my feet, but enough that I would be drenched within 5 minutes of standing outside. I usually don't mind the rain. I quite like it, actually. However, that night, I didn't feel like getting wet, especially since it would mean I'd likely have to change and shower when I got home. I didn't want anything to get in the way of me in my bed. I didn't expect the rain, so I hadn't brought an umbrella with me. Instead, I had to resort to rummaging for one in the storage room in the back of the building. It was hidden away in a corner behind some boxes, in a rather nasty state. I could have sworn there was some kind of mold growing on the fabric, or whatever that material at the top is called. Whatever it was, it's safe to say that the umbrella was old. It had some tears in it too, but I didn't really care at that point. I was just tired. And I didn't think I would need to use it much anyway, since I usually take the bus home. So I grabbed it and brought it outside with me, opening it above my head. It wasn't the greatest shield from the cold droplets, as I suspected. The holes in it allowed water to drip onto my shoulders and head, but just barely. I walked quickly to the bus stop and sat on the bench underneath the roof of the bus stop shelter. I closed the umbrella and placed it by my side, leaning it against the bench. The pitter-patter of the rain above my head was a good distraction from the annoyances of the day. As I said before, I don't really mind rain most of the time. I find the sound quite calming. I could fall asleep to it, and I almost did several times while waiting for that bus. I don't know how long I waited exactly before I finally checked my phone. It was dead. It must have died sometime while I was working. My phone has a bad habit of turning on randomly when I'm moving around with it. I think that drains the battery. And, of course, I wasn't perceptive or aware enough to notice until right then and there. Just great. Without my phone, I couldn't check what time the bus would arrive. But then I remembered that particular bus didn't run that late. The last it stopped there every night was 11:30 p.m., and I had left my work at 12 a.m. I would have to walk. Perfect. I mentally prepared myself to walk all the way back to my apartment. It would take maybe 30 minutes. Luckily, I remembered how to get back. I wasn't looking forward to walking back home late at night in the city suburbs. But I didn't really have a choice. It's not like I could call anyone to pick me up. I took that moldy old umbrella again and started on my long walk home, quickly getting lost in thought. I know that's not exactly a good thing to do as a woman walking alone at night, but the rain has a certain way of lulling me into an unaware, distracted state. So I didn't notice it at first. I walked for maybe 10 minutes by myself before I finally figured out that I wasn't entirely alone. I heard it first before anything else, and it caught me off guard. Its footsteps were unlike any footsteps I had ever heard before, sloshing through the rain-covered concrete. It was some kind of lurching gait, but it was faint. I wish I could describe it to you in its entirety, the uncanniness of it. I can try, though. It was unnatural. Not quite human, but not quite animal either. A silent, almost imperceivable splash, followed by a slow, sloshing sound, like someone was dragging their foot through the couple centimeters of water that was starting to run along the sidewalk. When I heard it, it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't necessarily the first time I had been followed. Usually those creeps are much better at disguising their footsteps. They match their gait to mine and stop when I stop. But when I stopped to look behind me that time, the pursuer did not stop. I could barely see anything at that moment, but I could hear it still, dragging itself closer. It must have been too far back to be able to see properly. All I saw was a silhouette. My brain wanted to brush it off as just some wild animal, like a raccoon rushing by, but my body didn't seem to get the message. I turned and continued walking, trying to convince myself that it was nothing to worry about, that no one would be crazy enough to be walking around at midnight in the pouring rain. No one but me, I suppose. But as I kept walking, I noticed that the sloshing was getting louder, even though the gait was surely slower than my own. I looked behind me again and finally saw it, illuminated in the light of a street lamp. It was a lot closer than I originally thought, and it didn't stop when I looked at it. Now, I say it, but the thing was feminine in appearance. I call it an it because, well, there's no way that thing was human. Just something pretending to be human. I suppose haggard could also work. It appeared as some kind of old woman, decrepit, haggish, and thin to the bone. It was so thin, in fact, that I'm surprised it wasn't just bone. There was no room between its skin and bones for any muscle. It was a wonder it was able to stand at all. From the distance we had between us at the time, I couldn't see all the details of its appearance, but what I could see wasn't pretty. Its clothes clung to its body, some kind of dress, I think. It was hard to tell as the clothing looked like it was practically merged to its skin. The only indicator that it was wearing clothes at all was the slightly different coloration of the skin and the fabric, with the dress being a subtle beige color. The haggard's hair hung from its head in long, black, stringy tendrils. It looked like one could easily take a wad of it in their hand and pull it out without even trying. Pale bald spots peeked through the clumps of hair. Its head hung at an awkward angle. Its mere appearance sent shivers throughout my body. What's even worse is that it was carrying a large, black plastic bag, dragging it across the wet floor. What that bag was for, I dared not imagine, but I knew exactly what it'd be used for, and I wasn't about to wait around to find out. I turned around to start walking again, this time faster. I remember my legs feeling stiff, preventing me from outright sprinting as fast as I could out of there. My hands tightened around the handle of the umbrella, gripping it as hard as I could to keep them from shaking too much. All I wanted now, more than ever, was to just get home. To somehow convince myself that it was all just in my head. Thinking back, I really shouldn't have gone straight home. I shouldn't have let it right to where I lived. I should have tried to lose it in the vastness that is the city suburbs. But would that really have made a difference? I'm sure it would have caught me eventually, and if it didn't, I was sure to get lost in the low visibility of the rainy night. I arrived at my apartment building at what seemed to be record time, for me at least. I fumbled for the key card that would allow me to enter the building, dropping it maybe once or twice. My sweating hands, combined with the soaking rain, only made it all the more difficult to finally swipe my card. The longer I spent out there in the rain with that thing, the more unease I felt. I wanted to look behind me, but I didn't dare. I was too afraid I'd find it breathing down my neck. After what felt like an eternity, I finally got it open, rushed in, and slammed the door closed behind me. I didn't bother to close the umbrella before making my way to my apartment. Not until I finally unlocked my door and got inside. After making sure it was locked, I leaned against the door and closed my eyes, trying to convince myself that I was safe. Whatever it was couldn't possibly get through the building door and my apartment door, I said to myself over and over. However, there was still a problem that my apartment was on the first floor. If I were to jump out of the window, I wouldn't break my legs, as the floor would just be right there. I know that doesn't seem important, but it is. Maybe you can guess why. I stayed there for a few minutes. My heart pounded against my chest, and my breathing came in shallow huffs. After finally calming myself down and convincing myself that I was safe, I went about preparing for bed. The apartment door opened into a combined living room and kitchen, with a hallway branching off to the side. The hallway led to a bathroom and my bedroom. I plugged in my phone in the kitchen and set the umbrella down near the end of the hallway. But as I was placing the umbrella, I heard a creaking sound coming from the living room area. My heart skipped a beat, and I considered ignoring the sound and dismissing it as just a figment of my imagination, an illusion created by my already alert and fearful mind. But I knew my fears wouldn't be extinguished if I didn't at least check. It's a good thing I did. The creaking continued as I approached the living room, and I soon saw it once again. A window on the opposite wall that I almost never opened was the source. Bony fingers wrapped around the bottom part of it, attempting to pull the window open, trying to get in. I stopped in my tracks when I saw that, and I saw it. It was standing there, just outside my window. I didn't even know that window could open, yet there it was, opening it. I knew I had to close that window before it got in, but my legs refused to move. I didn't understand how it could even figure out what apartment I was living in. Despite my fear, I hadn't turned on the lights when I got in. I knew doing so may give away what apartment I lived in, but it had still found me anyway. I suppose it could have figured it out through trial and error, or perhaps it was a coincidence, but that still wouldn't explain how it knew I lived on the first floor. I forced my legs to move. As much as I was afraid of going near it, I was even more afraid of letting it get in. Calling the police was the only option now, but first, I needed to close that window. I approached it cautiously, watching that thing for any sudden movements it might make. That was the closest I got to it, and I could see its face clearly. Its face was sunken in at the cheeks, and its skin was a pale grayish-blue color that was pruny at various places, the kind that you'd expect after spending a few hours in the pool. And it was thin, not its body, mind you, already mentioned that. I meant its skin. It was so thin that it was practically translucent, and even the faintest amount of light easily reflected off of it, only made more apparent with how covered in water that thing was. Seriously, it was as if it had just climbed out of a lake. Though, I suppose that makes sense, since I had been standing out in the rain. Still, it felt unnatural. I snapped out of my dazed state that caused me to stare fearfully at that thing's horrid appearance. I raised my hand to the top of the window, ready to close it, even if that meant closing it on that haggard's fingers. But then, it stopped prying the window open and looked at me. Its eyes were sunken in and empty. They stared deep into my soul, simultaneously looking at and through me. Its voice was gravelly and it spoke slowly. It sent a chill throughout my body. It was speaking to me. It wanted to get inside. I slammed the window down on its fingers and locked it. It didn't cry out. It didn't flinch. It just slid its fingers out from under the window. It stared at me. I slowly backed away, moving toward where I had placed my phone earlier. I swear I turned away for just a second to grab it, but when I turned back to look at the haggard once more, it was gone. Even though it was nowhere to be seen and the window was still closed, I still called the police. Luckily, my phone had charged just enough to allow me to make that call. I had a bad feeling that the haggard wouldn't let up, that it would find a way in no matter what. I don't really remember the call. I just know that I fumbled over the explanation of everything that happened. It must have sounded crazy, describing some mysterious humanoid that seemed to appear and disappear at random intervals, that had an appearance that wasn't possible for any person that was alive. I mostly remember just constantly looking around for anything that could give away that that thing was trying to get in again. It was only when I finished the call that I heard dripping coming from a different room. At first, I thought that I had maybe left a faucet on, but if that were the case, I would have surely noticed it sooner. Or perhaps I was too scared out of my mind to even comprehend that there was a leak somewhere until that moment. I knew that the dripping would drive me mad if I left it going. It would distract me from remaining alert, so I just had to stop it. It wasn't long until I found that the dripping wasn't coming from any faucet at all. It was coming from the ceiling in my apartment hallway. But that's impossible, I thought. Being on the first floor has its perks. If water were to leak through the roof of the building, it would leak into the apartments on the top floor. But of course, this wasn't normal dripping. The dripping was forming a dark puddle on the floor that was slowly expanding. Even worse was that there was a trail leading from the puddle further into the hallway. A long, broken-up trail separated in two. One half had water pooling at the floor every foot or so. The other half had water trailing along in a wobbly line. It mimicked the trail that thing would likely make with its unusual walking style. It was in my house. It was in my house, and I knew it. And it didn't get in through natural means. That was certain enough. I felt my heart leap to my throat. I wanted to run. But I knew that would be useless. No matter where I ran, it would follow me. It would find a way in. I couldn't outrun it. The only chance was to fight it head on. At that point, I didn't know what it was. Clearly it wasn't a woman. A ghost, maybe? A demon? Based on what you've told me, it seems like it's the latter. I didn't know that then, though. I didn't even know if I could do anything to hurt it. But I had to try to defend myself in one way or another. I took a knife from the kitchen and followed the trail into the hallway, flicking on the lights as I went. However, the trail led straight to the umbrella from earlier, then stopped. The handle was dripping wet. I know my hands were sweating while I was holding it earlier, but I don't sweat that much. It had to be that haggard that was the cause. I tried to look for it. I searched the hallway, my bedroom, everywhere. And I made sure all the windows were locked. The whole time I was poised, ready to plunge my knife into its chest if it ever decided to jump out at me. But I didn't find it. I returned to the umbrella, threw it into the closet, and barricaded the door. I don't think that really did much, but what else was I supposed to do? I needed some semblance of control. Then I went and sat on the couch in the living room, waiting for the police to arrive. They sure were taking their sweet time. I didn't let myself dwell too long on the events of the night, of what could happen to me if that haggard ever got its hands on me. I knew that would only make my fears worse. But at this point, it was no use. Even if I didn't think about it, even if I tried to distract myself, I still couldn't calm down. I didn't want to be there anymore. The evidence was indisputable. I couldn't ignore everything I saw. All I could do was wait and see who would get to me first. The police? Or that thing. After maybe 5 or 10 excruciating minutes, I heard a knock on the door. I really should have thought it through more before going towards it. I should have learned my lesson. But I was just so desperate to get some help. I thought it was the police. I thought that ghost demon ladies wouldn't have the decency to knock. So I went right up to that door and peered through the peephole. I shrieked when I saw it again, staring right at me through the hole. The distortion of the glass only made it look all the more creepy. Its hand gripped fiercely around the large black bag that it held up.
I'm wet. Let me in.
The tone was harsher, more urgent, more desperate. How did it get into the building? I thought. After all, you need to have a key card to get in or get buzzed in by a current tenant. But it had somehow found a way through, and if I could find a way past the building door, what was stopping it from finding a way through my apartment door? It was playing with me. It had to be. I was just prey to it, something to be hunted, toyed with, devoured. It could find a way into my apartment anytime it wanted. At least, that's what I thought then. I know you said that it could only truly get inside if invited, but still. The sound of the buzzer signaling someone was asking to be let in made me jump. Luckily, when I checked the camera, I saw that it was indeed the police.
Police. We're responding to a report of a suspicious person trying to enter this apartment. Open up.
I was glad to let them in, relieved. When I looked out at the people again, however, it was gone. I knew it'd be back though. I let the police into my apartment. They swept all the rooms, asked me some questions, checked in and around the building, everywhere and everything you can think of. They found no one at all. No one suspicious, that is. They were going to leave me without doing anything else, but I couldn't let them. I couldn't bear to be there alone for another second. I knew it'd be back for me, with its empty eyes, gnarled hands, and large black bag. I begged the police to take me with them, at least until I could figure something out. They agreed to my desperate pleas and brought me back to the station, where I waited for a friend of mine to come and pick me up. I stayed with that friend until you guys took me here. And I haven't seen that thing since that night. Looking back, I can't help but wonder if things would have turned out differently had I not taken that extra shift. Had I gone home earlier? Did that thing follow me only because of the rain? Or because it was dark as well? And why me? I like to think that I live my life fairly well. I'm not a bad person, I think. So why would it target me? But what am I saying? You're not going to answer me, are you? Yeah, that's what I thought. Hey everyone. In case you didn't know, I'm Amethyscent, and that was my first CreepyDrawsta, The Woman in the Rain. I've written a lot in my life, but this was my first time writing something creepy. I hope it was okay. Special thanks to my brothers for voicing the woman in the rain and the police officer. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you're interested in seeing more of this kind of video. And if you're interested in more of my art, feel free to follow me on Instagram. The link's in the description. Take care and farewell.